They don't say it out loud, but you have felt it, that quiet shift, the unease when you don't play along, you don't chase, you don't beg, you don't try to fit in. And somehow, that makes you dangerous. You have been called distant, cold, arrogant. But what if that's just their word for free? Because here's the truth, no one wants to admit, people are uncomfortable around a man who needs nothing. He can walk away without a second glance. He does not smile to be liked. He does not argue to be right. He does not post to be seen. And that terrifies them. Not because he's cruel, not because he's better, but because his silence exposes something ugly in them. Their addiction to approval, their fear of being alone, their constant need to be chosen. See, most people live their entire lives as hostages, held captive by opinions, by trends, by the invisible leash of validation. But then there's him, the man who does not need you, does not need your praise, does not need your permission. And when you can't control someone with your approval, you start to fear what else you can't control. He's not trying to prove anything. He just is, unapologetically, unmoved, unbothered, and in a world built on performance. His stillness is a threat, so they call him antisocial, detached, emotionally unavailable. But what if that's not true? What if, just like Nietzsche warned, the truly dangerous man is the one who creates his own values, instead of inheriting yours? Because a man who defines himself can't be manipulated. A man who finds peace alone becomes untouchable. And a man who does not need you cannot be owned. This video will reveal the brutal psychological truth behind emotional self-sufficiency. Why solitude is not weakness. Why your silence can feel like violence. And why the man who walks alone may just be the only one who's free. They have told you that being alone is dangerous, not physically, but emotionally. They whisper it into every ad, every post, every late-night doubt. You need people. You need attention. You need love, or there's something wrong with you. But what if that's the first lie? What society truly fears is not your loneliness. It's your emotional self-sufficiency. Because a person who does not crave constant affirmation, who is not addicted to the warmth of being liked, who can sit alone in silence and not flinch, is someone who can't be controlled. See, loneliness is marketable. If you feel empty, you will buy more. You will consume more love stories, more products, more distractions. You will chase connections like they are oxygen, and every algorithm is designed to make sure you never stop. But solitude, true, sovereign solitude, that's a threat to the entire system. Because the man who does not need to be seen does not click. The man who is not desperate to be loved does not scroll. And the man who finds peace without performance does not obey. Capitalism does not just sell products. It sells validation. Instagram sells you beauty. LinkedIn sells you status. TikTok sells you attention. And all of it is designed to reinforce one message. You are not enough. Not until you belong, not until you're approved. But that man, the one who walks alone, smiles at nothing, thinks deeply and says little, he disrupts the economy of insecurity. He becomes a glitch in the emotional code. And glitches, my friend, get labeled. They will call him distant, emotionally unavailable, detached, even dangerous, because he broke the loop. Carl Jung warned about this. He did not see neediness as weakness. He saw it as a symptom, a sign of an unindividuated psyche, someone who has not yet separated their identity from the collective. Because when you're not whole within yourself, you need the world to tell you who you are. But once you start individuating, once you face your shadow, listen to your silence, and reclaim the energy you have scattered across people and screens, you begin to stand alone. And when you stand alone, you stop being programmable. You stop chasing what others chase. You stop playing roles to feel accepted. You stop needing noise to feel alive. And that makes you unreadable to systems built on predictability. You don't vote how they expect. You don't buy what they push. You don't follow their fears. You're not lonely. You're not broken. You're just not for sale anymore. And in a culture built on control, independence is not celebrated. It's pathologized. They don't want you healed. They want you hooked. Because if you ever truly become whole, you will walk away, and they will have nothing left to sell you. What if your need for others was never really about love? What if it was survival, the need to fit in, to be liked, to belong, not out of connection, but out of fear? This isn't just social instinct, this is psychic conditioning, and breaking free from it is a form of rebellion. Carl Jung called this process individuation, the journey of becoming a whole self, not the self shaped by culture, religion, parents, or peers, but the self that exists beneath all that. Individuation isn't self-improvement, it's self-confrontation. It means facing the parts of you you've buried, the rage you suppressed, the needs you silenced, the voice you replaced with obedience. And it means pulling back the identity that was built for you and asking, who was I before the world told me who to be? Because most people don't want to become whole. They want to be liked. They want to belong. And belonging often means abandoning the very parts of yourself that make you real. Jung warned us, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But no one tells you that becoming who you truly are means being willing to be alone. Now, Nietzsche took this even further. He didn't just talk about becoming yourself. He talked about burning everything else down in the process. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche introduces the concept of the Übermensch, the one who rises above the herd, who doesn't inherit values, but creates them, not through ego, but through will, through pain, through solitude. He writes, the individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. If you try it, you will be lonely often, and sometimes frightened, but no price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself. Most people are not living their own life. They're living out a blueprint they never questioned. They think what their group thinks, desire what others desire, judge what others judge, and they call this morality. But it's not morality, it's obedience. True morality, the kind Nietzsche admired, is dangerous because it doesn't follow, it creates. This is where Jung and Nietzsche align. They both believe the normal man is not whole, he is split. He is performing, he is controlled. Jung's shadow, Nietzsche's herd. Two faces of the same trap. Now imagine the man who escapes it, who integrates his shadow, the ugly, repressed, chaotic truths within, who doesn't hide from what he feels, but transforms it. Imagine the man who no longer lives to meet expectations, but to embody his own truth. He will not be easy to digest. He will not fit the roles others assigned him. He will be misunderstood, mocked, feared, because that kind of man, a man who doesn't inherit his soul, but builds it from scratch, is a danger to everything built on imitation. He is not just alone. He is not just independent. He is in rebellion, psychic rebellion. He has declared war, not on others, but on the parts of himself that once begged to be accepted. And in killing those parts, he was born. That's why solitude isn't peace. It's fire. It's a furnace where the false self dies, and the real one rises. They never had to put chains on you. They just convinced you that freedom felt like attention. They gave you a screen, a scrolling feed, a digital applause machine, and you stepped inside willingly. You didn't even feel the door close. Social media isn't a tool, it's a drug. And the high it sells isn't pleasure, it's validation. Every like is a hit of approval, every follower, a whisper that you matter, every notification, a reminder that you're still seen. And so, you keep posting, keep curating, keep performing, until the silence feels like death. Because somewhere along the way, your value got tied to your visibility. They've made you afraid of being invisible, of being alone, of being forgotten. But that fear isn't yours. It was given to you, marketed, engineered, monetized. Now look at consumerism. They don't just sell you products, they sell you identities. Wear this to feel confident. Buy this to feel powerful. Drive this, and people will finally respect you. You're not choosing, you're compensating, not expressing freedom, but trying to escape a hollowness that was planted in you on purpose. Because an insecure mind is the perfect customer. You can't sell wholeness, but you can sell insecurity wrapped in a solution. And then there's love, or what we now call swipe culture. Dating apps were never designed to help you connect. They were designed to keep you swiping, to reduce desire into algorithms, to make intimacy a game of numbers, to train your instincts like a lab rat chasing hearts and dopamine. You're not finding love. You're becoming programmable. Every match is another lever pulled. Every rejection is another psychological button pushed, until your self-worth becomes just another metric you try to fix with angles, bios, filters, strategies. You're not building a relationship, you're optimizing one. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life, and you will call it fate." And that's what's happening here. You think you're choosing, you're not. You're reacting, obeying invisible scripts, living inside systems that trained your nervous system to associate emptiness with stillness and worth with performance. You were programmed to crave the crowd, to fear your own silence, to need everyone because they need you needy. But then there's solitude, true, intentional solitude. And that's where the system starts to break, because when you unplug, when you stop checking, swiping, chasing, reacting, you start seeing. You start noticing how predictable everything has become, how manipulated your desires really are, how much of your life was built on someone else's code. And the moment you become aware of it, you are no longer inside it. That's why solitude is so feared, not because it's lonely, but because it's liberating. The man who can sit in silence, who doesn't need likes, praise, attention, or distraction, is not part of the program anymore, and the system can't sell you what you've stopped needing. They say he's dangerous, but not because he shouts, not because he fights, not because he threatens. He's dangerous because he doesn't need to. Because when a man becomes whole, when he masters himself instead of others, he becomes something society can't classify or control. Here's what makes him truly dangerous. 1. Radical self-honesty. Most people lie to themselves every single day about their relationships, their beliefs, their pain. They wear a mask so long, they forget it's a mask. They build a life on half-truths and performance, and call it success. But the dangerous man, he faces the mirror no one else dares to look into. He asks himself questions that tear through the illusion. What am I pretending not to know? Whose dream am I living? What part of me am I still running from? And he answers, without flinching. He doesn't use positivity as an escape. He doesn't numb himself with busyness. He stares into the cracks until he sees what's hiding beneath. Real-world example. He ends a long-term relationship, not because it's toxic, but because it's false, because it's built on comfort, not truth. Philosophical anchor. You must become your own teacher, your own disciplinarian, your own judge. Carl Jung. Challenge to the viewer. When was the last time you told yourself the truth, even when it hurt? 2. Emotional sovereignty. Most people chase love to feel whole, chase approval to feel worthy, chase attention to feel alive. But the dangerous man, he doesn't chase. He doesn't beg to be liked. He doesn't twist himself to be desired. He doesn't sell out his values for a seat at the table. He has become his own source, and that makes him immune to the world's emotional blackmail. Real-world example. He's ghosted, ignored, misunderstood. But he doesn't spiral. Because he knows rejection isn't death, it's data. Philosophical anchor. He who cannot obey himself will be commanded. Nietzsche. Challenge to the viewer. Would your self-worth survive if no one responded to you today? 3. Cognitive autonomy. The world is full of borrowed beliefs. People inherit morality like hand-me-down clothes, never questioning if it fits. But the dangerous man? He questions everything. He knows. If your beliefs are not yours, then neither is your life. He examines his principles like weapons. He sharpens them through thought, through pain, through contradiction, until what remains is his real-world example. He leaves a religion, not in anger, not in rebellion, but in quiet realization. This was never mine. Philosophical anchor. No price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself. Nietzsche. Challenge to the viewer. What belief are you still holding on to, just because you were told it was right? 4. Shadow mastery. Everyone has darkness. The difference is what they do with it. Most repress it, deny it, project it onto others. But the dangerous man, he walks into the cave. He meets his shame, his rage, his emptiness, and he makes peace with it, not by avoiding it, but by understanding it. He knows what you suppress controls you. What you face transforms you. Real-world example. He doesn't snap in arguments, not because he's passive, but because he knows what anger really is, grief in disguise. He's already buried it, already healed it, already walked through its fire. Philosophical anchor. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Carl Jung. Challenge to the viewer. What part of your inner world have you exiled? That now controls you from the shadows. These 4 traits are not personality types. They're battle scars, earned in silence, forged in solitude, and each one makes a man less reactive, less obedient, and infinitely more free. That's why they call him dangerous, because he's no longer playing their game. He's not seeking your praise or afraid of your rejection. He doesn't need you to like him. He needs you to move. They romanticize solitude until you actually choose it, until you start walking away from the noise and the people who only loved the version of you that needed them. Because that's the real cost of freedom, not being alone, but staying alone even when it hurts. Not because you hate people, not because you don't feel, but because once you've tasted peace, you can't go back to begging for crumbs of connection. The dangerous man doesn't isolate himself out of arrogance. He walks alone because he's been burned too many times by people who mistook his depth for damage, his silence for disinterest, his truth for aggression. He starts to realize it's not that people don't care, it's that most of them can't meet him where he lives. And so, the path narrows, friends fade, family drifts, invitations stop coming. People stop asking how you are because they're terrified you might tell them the truth. They call him cold, detached, too intense. But what they're really saying is, you make me uncomfortable because you're honest, because you've shed the mask they're still clinging to. And that level of self-possession, it's threatening. You're not easy to manipulate. You don't flatter for acceptance. You don't need their validation, so you become the mirror they avoid. And no one wants to face the mirror that shows them who they've become. So, yes, this path costs everything. It costs the illusion of belonging. It costs the comfort of being understood. It costs your place at the table, if that table was built on pretending. But here's what it gives you in return: clarity. You begin to see who actually values you, and who just needed you needy. Power, not power over others, but over yourself. The kind of power that can't be taken, because it was never borrowed. Peace, not the peace of silence, but the peace of no longer performing. You stop chasing. You stop proving. You stop shrinking yourself just to fit inside a world that fears its own depth. And what's left is freedom. Not the loud, showy kind, but the kind that comes from knowing you don't owe anyone your softness just to be safe. This is why the dangerous man walks alone. Not because he loves the distance, but because he refuses to trade his integrity for inclusion. He would rather be misunderstood in truth than loved in illusion. And in that decision, he becomes untouchable, not invincible, not emotionless, but so deeply grounded in who he is that no one else gets to define him again. That's the price of freedom, and the gift. Because while the world trades itself for approval, he is becoming something rare, a man who belongs fully to himself. They won't say it outright, they'll never admit it, but deep down, they fear him. Not because he's violent, not because he's angry, but because he's free. Free from the systems that keep everyone else in line. Free from the lies they all agreed to believe. He's not loud. He's not starting a revolution. He's not waving a flag. But his very existence, his silence, his self-possession, his refusal to play the game, is a threat. Economic threat. In a world built on insecurity, you are most valuable when you feel incomplete, because people who feel whole don't buy as much. They don't need luxury to feel worthy. They don't need fashion to feel beautiful. They don't need status symbols to feel powerful. They've stopped chasing dopamine, so the ads don't work, the sales don't tempt, the trends don't matter. The dangerous man is a broken customer. He sees the game too clearly. He's not a consumer, he's a witness, and that breaks the cycle. Political threat. They can't win him over with slogans, can't scare him with outrage, can't herd him with headlines. Because he doesn't follow ideology, he dissects it. He doesn't react, he reflects. He doesn't pick sides, he questions the entire map. You can't control a man who has no tribe, because he has nothing to lose for thinking differently. He votes with awareness, stands alone when necessary. And that kind of autonomy, it terrifies the machine, because the system isn't built to fight rebels. It's built to silence thinkers. Psychological threat, but perhaps most dangerous of all, is the way he makes people feel about themselves. He doesn't even have to speak. His presence alone is a disruption, a mirror held up too steadily, too honestly, for others to look away. Because when you meet someone who needs nothing from you, someone who isn't trying to impress, please, or flatter, it becomes painfully obvious how much of your identity is performance, and that makes people uneasy. He is the silent crack in the system's mirror, the one reminder that another kind of life is possible, and possibility is a threat to comfort. So they call him dangerous, distant, cold. They reduce his depth to pathology, label his clarity as arrogance, mock his independence as just a phase. Because if they admitted what he truly is, a man who can't be sold, swayed, or seduced, they'd have to confront what they've become. And most people would rather demonize what they can't control than evolve into what they secretly admire. So, yes, they fear him. Not because he's evil, but because he's free. And nothing threatens a controlled world more than a man who doesn't need it. This kind of man doesn't appear by accident. He isn't born. He's built, forged in silence, formed in discomfort, shaped by choices most people run from. If you want to become him, not just admire him, there's a path. And it begins with truth. Every night, sit with yourself, no music, no scrolling, just a pen, a page, and your unfiltered honesty. Ask, what did I seek today that I didn't need? Where did I lie to fit in? What fear shaped my choices? Marcus Aurelius did this. It wasn't self-help. It was self-discipline, an act of psychological hygiene. He knew, if you don't audit your soul, you become a stranger to yourself. This isn't journaling, it's confrontation. You want freedom? Then you need to meet the parts of yourself you've buried, the anger, the envy, the weakness you've been pretending isn't there. Sit with the mirror and ask, what do I hate in others that secretly lives in me? What am I scared people might find out? What parts of me are still owned by others, by culture, by trauma, by expectation? This is shadow work, and it hurts. But the man who hasn't faced his darkness is still controlled by it. Take a fast from the crowd, log out, delete the apps, shut off the noise. Not forever, just long enough to remember what silence sounds like. Because if your worth rises and falls with likes, views, or replies, you're still owned. Start small. 1 hour a day with no stimulation, then stretch it. Walk without music, sit without company, and let your nervous system remember, stillness is not a threat, it's a test, and most never pass it. Don't borrow beliefs, don't repeat slogans, don't inherit values like furniture passed down from dead relatives. Ask yourself, what would I believe if no one told me what was right? What does integrity look like when no one's watching? Who do I become when the world stops clapping? Write your own code, carve it into your decisions, and be willing to be exiled for it. That's not rebellion, that's sovereignty. Becoming this man is not a weekend project. It's not an aesthetic. It's a dismantling of illusions, of programming, of everything that ever taught you to stay small, agreeable, and dependent. But once you begin, once you commit to walking this path, something irreversible happens. You stop being part of the audience, and you become the author. Here's the part no one tells you. When you stop chasing people, they start noticing you. When you stop begging to be chosen, you start standing out. And when you stop needing anyone, everyone starts feeling your presence. That's the paradox. The man who walks alone, who does not flinch in silence, who radiates self-possession without saying a word, he becomes magnetic. Not because he's trying, but because he is not. People are drawn to groundedness, to stillness, to that rare energy that does not need affirmation, but emits clarity. It's not charisma, it's not charm, it's integration. Carl Jung knew this. He understood that once a man confronts his shadow, once he integrates his light and darkness into a whole being, he becomes a mirror, and mirrors don't lie. That's why people either gravitate toward him or flee. They see something in him they have lost in themselves, or never had. The integrated man is a threat, not because he attacks, but because his existence reflects who others pretended to be. And that reflection is uncomfortable, because when you're around someone who does not need you, does not perform for you, does not bend to be accepted, you start to feel the ways you still do. That's the silent revolution. Not noise, not argument, just presence. He speaks, and people listen. He looks, and people look away. He stays silent, and people feel it. Because neediness repels. But sovereignty attracts, not desperately, magnetically. And this is what they never tell you, that the man who no longer needs anything starts to have everything. Not because he craves it, but because life flows to those who don't cling. So no, solitude is not weakness. It's not a punishment. It's not some lonely curse to be fixed. It's power. It's wholeness. It's the furnace where the real self is born. And the man who masters solitude, who does not run from his thoughts, who no longer confuses silence with emptiness, becomes something terrifyingly rare. He becomes free. And freedom, in a world built on control, is irresistible. In a world addicted to noise, the man who can sit in silence becomes a goddamn revolution.